Hello and welcome to another episode of StratcomTalks. I'm your host, Jaffer Hasman. Today we will be talking about intelligence in diplomacy, how states are using their intelligence services to reinforce their foreign interests. And to discuss all this and more, today I'm joined by Jeffrey M. Nicholson. He is a former U.S. Army intelligence officer. Jeff, thank you very much for joining us today on this podcast.
Thank you. Thanks to be here.
All right, Jeff, first and foremost, tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, I just recently retired intelligence officer from the U.S. Army. I worked formerly in the NSA and also with multiple combat tours and did about 30 years of service. And so now I'm just enjoying retirement, but I get to talk to people like you.
All right, thank you very much. Now let's jump right into the topic. Jeff, this is something that many of us are wondering. Perhaps this is something many of us have been wondering for years. How is intelligence used by states in the world of modern diplomacy?
Well, we think about intelligence used in diplomacy as several fields. Normally there's the analysis of closed communication to policymakers. So we access messages being sent between policymakers and try to access that. That can get us lots of information about anything from crops to economic positions to sudden troop movements or something like that. So it becomes an early warning indicator of what policymakers might be doing or what's happening in their countries. We also can use it to publicly disclose things that we're finding out to hold aggressors accountable, such as troop movements and things like that. But also we use it behind the scenes to understand the intentions of diplomats during talks. So going into negotiations, forewarned about what diplomats are going to do gives you a power position on the table.
Okay. And what kind of challenges do intelligence officers face these days?
Well, right now you're seeing a lot of, think of it as the intelligence is analysis. It's not necessarily forensic. And so a lot of things happen. You put out analysis that, this could be happening, this could be happening. And we like to say it's always an operational success and an intelligence failure. And so a lot of times you just say it's the intelligence is wrong. Like, for example, Colin Powell citing chemical weapons in Iraq. The intelligence was there that, yes, there was a possibility that Saddam Hussein is still producing chemical weapons. Of course, after the war, it's like, oh, yep, intelligence failure. But so policymakers and diplomats will use it to make decisions, and then it becomes, bad intelligence. So there's that. And then there's also public scrutiny. The idea that we shouldn't be using intelligence. Like take the public scrutiny against the Brits. The Brits were, using MI6 to target the G20 summit, and it was leaked to The Guardian. And so there's backlash when you see basically intelligence gathering, even though it's being done pretty much by everybody.
Okay. Now, I think you have made a good point there that sometimes states act on a possibility. Now, how common is that? Or do you think it's more common for a state to act on concrete facts rather than possibility of something happening?
When you have robust intelligence, you don't just listen to one report. It's like if you have you pick up one report and you're like, okay, that's something to watch, but until you see it happening across different fields, until you start seeing it happen across multiple disciplines and you're seeing multiple indicators, you don't want to lift it up to policymakers and say, oh, this is what's definitely happening. And so generally, developed intelligence communities can take these multiple indicators and be pretty certain what's happening. So yeah, there is that where developed intelligence communities are much better than some of the smaller countries who might be acting on just what they can gather. But countries like Russia, England, Israel, China, they're pretty good at it this point, where they don't jump at little things.
Okay, but bad intelligence does happen, correct?
Bad intelligence, it's an interesting way to say it. But yes, they use the term bad intelligence, or what also happens, misreading or not getting the effect you want. Like you can take chemical weapons in Iraq, right? As an example. Were there chemical weapons in Iraq? Yes, of course there were. I mean, Saddam Hussein used 40 known chemical strikes against Kurds. Were there chemical weapons found afterwards? Yes, but they were in such a state of disrepair that they weren't useful. So did he have that he never showed to the, did he never fully disclose like he was demanded to after the first Gulf War? He didn't. And there were still chemical weapons there, but they were in such bad repair. And so you show aerial footage in front of the UN that says, oh, look, there's a possibility here of him developing chemical weapons, but you don't have forces on the ground to do it. So what happens is policymakers might use intelligence for their own agendas. And then when it comes out, the agenda wasn't very popular, they can turn around and use intelligence as a scapegoat. That seems to happen quite a lot.
Are you saying that there are times when intelligence officers are blamed for someone else's crimes?
I wouldn't say it that way. I would say it as, because what I talk about is agendas as opposed to crimes. So looking at foreign policy, right? Take foreign policy. We use intelligence to shape our foreign policy because we have to know what is happening in foreign countries. Take Ukraine, for example. You have this Russia building up in the Ukraine, and so intelligence was leaked, basically saying, okay, the Ukraine is in jeopardy of being invaded. So that intelligence could be used as, well, we need to send a message to Russia that they can't do this. But what happens if a war starts? What happens if let's say the U.S. decides to send troops into Ukraine because intelligent, and that war starts? Is the war started because of the intelligence, or is it because of the actors who started massing troops? So yeah, it shapes agendas, but intelligence is nothing more than a tool. And so when you use words like crimes or war crimes, that's pretty extreme language. But it does shape our agendas. So Ukraine can use it as a tool to say, hey, we need help because we're seeing this happening. And that's really it. It's a tool. The nice thing about now, very different from what used to happen, is, back in the days of World War II, we had, the Black Chamber pre-World War II and things like that, where it was nothing more than just walking over to the telegraph office and demanding that the telegraph office hand us over the communications over to ambassadors. But now a lot of intelligence is available to everyone. The press, like, for example, you as a journalist can look at satellite imagery of those same troop buildups, and the press can be used as well. So you notice what's happening is a lot of intelligence being leaked to the press, where it's, oh, we see something happening here and there's a leak. And the press becomes a part of that instrument of diplomacy.
Okay, I think you have made some great points there. So certainly, if intelligence is used as an effective tool, it can help in saving innocent lives.
Yeah, take Rohingya. Like, if you look at the Rohingya villages that were burning in 2017, you had 200 villages burning. That could be seen from space. And so it was commercial satellite imagery used by the press. Oh, look, there are 200 villages burning right now in Rohingya, and there's human rights violations and genocide happening. And it was that effectively open satellite imagery that could be used for that. You have social media reports, troops being loaded on trains and through Russia towards the Ukraine border. You have social media images of Russian uniformed troops in the Belarus. So yeah, you have this ability to share information publicly, and that's often used, if you think about it, as a power tactic. So previously, if we like JFK in the missile crisis, JFK during the Cuban Missile Crisis showed publicly that there are missiles in Cuba. It was used as a way to try to stop expansionism and try to stop aggressors. Now you have the public able to do things like that with cell phones and access to satellite imagery.
All right. Now, Jeff, let's move forward with the discussion. Now, you have mentioned journalists, and these days with the emergence of smartphones, I believe everyone is a journalist, because everyone has the capability to go out there, record a video, or shoot a film. So what are your thoughts on people using their cell phones for intelligence gathering or perhaps journalism?
Well, of course, it can be dangerous, but it is a shift of power. And what you're seeing is this massive shift of power. Like, take the Arab Spring. The Arab Spring was people coordinated for the first time, seeing these dictators and authoritarian governments throughout the Middle East, and the people being able to organize and then send pictures of the oversteps of the government police. So this is happening everywhere. Whenever you start to see authoritarian governments stepping up and overstepping and crushing their crushing protests, you're seeing pictures of it. Is it dangerous? Yes. I mean, at this point,
I would like you to expand on this dangerous part. What kind of dangers do you think are involved for those who are using their cell phones for intelligence gathering?
well, take arrests. I mean, you have arrests in China, you have arrests in the Belarus, you have arrests in Moscow. You have even take the U.S. Capitol, where there were protests that stormed the U.S. Capitol building, and it was video footage captured by sometimes even the protesters that were used in those arrests. And so those arrests become one of the biggest dangers. In countries like the U.S., you have a due process that has to happen and a public court system. In other countries, you don't have a public court system. You have the ability to arrest people and have them just disappear. And so one of the dangers of people just randomly posting videos is they can be attracted by intelligence communities or security forces in authoritarian governments. And that is, again, encroaching upon human rights.
Okay. Now, Jeff, my last question to you. Where do you see the future of the world of intelligence? Because, see, with the emergence of technology and smartphones, like we discussed, everyone has the capacity and capability to do journalism and engage in intelligence gathering. So, do you think that technology has replaced conventional intelligence gathering? Do we even need intelligence officers these days when we have technology which can do their work remotely? I
definitely see a field for human intelligence, and you need to have human interaction, especially because in, take, authoritarian areas where they may have complete access to the communication systems, human interaction becomes much more important. On another answer to your question, what do I see as the future for intelligence like this? There's been a shift. Originally, intelligence gathering was around diplomatic communications. And then around Cold War, it shifted to be like early warning, especially during, when terrorist attacks became common. The Cold War focus and the war on terrorism focus was always early warning of attacks. Now you're seeing a shift in intelligence away from just diplomacy and just military or terrorist-related criminal activity. You're also seeing a shift towards academics and corporate espionage, where, like, take China. When you can influence trade negotiations, that is a massive power play for a country economically. But if you could take academic information, intellectual property, and you can bring it into your country, that is also a massive economic power play. And what you're seeing is China, instead of focusing more on diplomacy and military, they're focusing a lot on academic espionage.
All right. Jeffrey and Nicholson, thank you very much for taking out the time for this podcast. I really appreciate your analysis. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
And thanks to our audience for tuning in. Until next time, bye for now.